Welcome back. In exercise 4.4, we're going to create a 3D model of a shop using AutoCAD, specifically AutoCAD 2022 for Mac. In this model, we're going to have a representation of the walls and the floor of the shop. We're also going to have a conveyor going down the center of the shop. We're going to have benches that we've actually created in a previous exercise that we're going to import into this drawing. And we're also going to have stick figures representing a small female and a large male not being shown here. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to hide this. I'm going to open AutoCAD. And if you get the option, choose AutoCAD 3D.dwt. That's the drawing template. If it doesn't give you that option, don't worry about it, because we're going to set the key settings manually anyway. You can actually go to this 3D ISO view simply by coming up to the drawing cube and clicking on one corner. And I like to arrange this so that my y-axis kind of goes up and off to the right, and the x-axis goes up, down and off to the right, and the z-axis goes straight up. Our dimensions are going to be given to us in meters, so let's set the units for meters. Units, and this will be the same whether you're working on the Mac or the Windows. If it doesn't give you a decimal in this first choice, select decimal. Precision, we'll just arbitrarily go to 0.00 or 2 decimal places. It'll get us down to their centimeter if we're doing dimensions. And we'll come down to the bottom. This is probably the most important. Specify meters down here, because the benches and the workers we created previously were in centimeters, and if we specify meters here, it will scale those automatically for us. Click OK. Now let's create some layers here, and I got my block window open, so I'm going to change that to layers, and I want to do a new layer. We'll name that one, the first one, shop. That'll be our shop layout. Return, and then we'll do another one for the conveyor. I'll call that conveyor. Like that. Return, and I'm going to make the shop layer active. So I'll come up here to shop, and we're good to go. And we can play with the colors later. All right, so now let's go ahead and start the shop. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw the shop down here in the lower in the XY plane, and the dimensions are 1, 0 on the horizontal axis and 18 meters on the long axis. I'll type return, and it didn't give it to me, so that tells me it's not giving me relative coordinates. So I'm going to erase that. I'm going to come down here and turn on my dynamic menu, and that should make sure that says enabled. Okay. This is enabled. Okay, so let's try that again. Okay, we'll come up here, and again we'll go 10, 1, 1, 0, comma, and the opposite point we want for 18. Okay, that looks good. And now we will go Z for zoom, A for all, and there's our workplace. Good. All right, now let's go ahead and put the conveyor in there. So I'm going to shift the conveyor layer. And the conveyor, again, we'll start with making a footprint of the conveyor. The conveyor is 12 meters long. Let me just verify that. Yes, 12 meters. And it's going to be 0.75 meters wide. So I'm going to make this 0.75, comma, 12. Okay, and there's the conveyor. I can put it anywhere. I just linked it to this corner, because the next thing I'm going to do is move it to the center of the workplace. Now, you might want to check your snap settings, because this is going to affect how easy it is to do this next one. So I'll go over here to Object Snap, and I basically got everything turned on. So, and you may or may not want to do that in some cases, because sometimes you'll have too many snap things close to each other, and they'll interfere with each other. But for now, let's just go ahead and try it. So I'm going to type move, and now I'm going to click on the conveyor here. I'll type return to tell it I'm done selecting, and you can see right away this geometric center pops up, and that's great. And I'll come over here, and the geometric center of the shop pops up. and I'll just move it over and it'll snap onto that. So that should locate my conveyor right in the center of the shop. And if you want to check it, sometimes it's convenient to go out and look at a top view of this, and that looks pretty well centered. We could measure it if we want to be even more certain, but I think that's probably a pretty safe assumption. Okay, now I'm going to hide the shop just so it gets it out of the way, and I'll zoom in on this. So I'll go Z again and A for all. Okay, now this is going to be a roller conveyor, and it's actually easiest if we construct our rollers now and move them into position. So I'm going to put I want to start putting a circle on the end of this. That's going to be the cross section of the circle. But you may recall that the circle command defaults to putting circles in the XY plane. So I'm going to have to create a temporary XY plane that corresponds to the world coordinate system in YZ, so I can create this circle. And I'll do that using the user coordinate system. I'll just say new USC, and let's put it out here on the end so it's kind of out of my way. And you can see that it's not so easy to get this lined up with the other or with the conveyor. So actually what I can do is just simply make this turn on the ortho mode, so it forces it to align this with the X, Y, and Z axes. I'll just go function 8 to turn on the ortho mode. And now you see it, it constrains it that way. So I'll align the X-axis with the conveyor, and then I'm going to put the Y-axis vertical. Okay, now that should allow me to make my circle in the XY plane, or my user coordinate system. So I can either come over here and click on circle, or I can just type CI. It'll be the same whether you're on the Mac or the Windows machine. I'll come down and click on this corner. I'll just drag that out far, so now I got my circle oriented correctly. And now the circle, or the rollers, have a cross-sectional diameter of 5 centimeters. So that's going to give us a radius of 0.025 meters. So I'm going to type 0.025, and there's my cross section. And of course it looks pretty small, so we'll zoom in on that. So I'm just going to go Z, and I'm actually going to draw a window around this. Specify a corner of a window, something like this. And there it goes. I kind of zoomed off my field view, and even zoom in on just slightly more. Okay, so now the way we're going to make the rollers, just simply extrude it across the width of the conveyor. So I'm going to use the extrude command, ext, for extrude. I'll come back and select the circles, my cross section, and now I'll just kind of start dragging it towards the other end. And I can try to snap on this, or it's probably more reliable to just type 0.75, and there's my roller. And actually, let's zoom in a little bit. You notice I didn't get a solid that time, and it's because I didn't have this in a solid mode. It actually just extruded the surface. So that's because that's where it was left the last time I did an extrusion. So let's undo that. Type U for undo. I'm going to type extrude again, and this time I'm going to type mode, MO for mode, return, and you can see it gives me the option of solid or surface, so I'm going to type solid. I could just click on it. I've got my hands on the keyboard, not on the mouse. Okay, so now I'll select my circle, return, and now I'll move it. Now you can see it looks a little different. It's a solid as opposed to just a shell or cylinder. So let's see, we'll make that 0.75, and there's my roller. Now I want this to actually, it's going to be hanging off the end if I leave it here a little bit, so I want to actually move it a little bit to the right. So let's zoom in on just a little bit more, and I'm going to type move, and I'm going to select the roller. I'll type return, and now let's see if we can come back here and I can catch an endpoint. It doesn't really matter what I stamp on because I'm going to enter, I want to give it a displacement here of 0.025. So I'm going to go 0.025, and you can see it just moved it now, so it's just inside the footprint of this conveyor. And now I'm going to move it vertically, and I want the top of that to actually end up being at 0.9 meters. So it's 0.025 radius, so that means I need to move it up 0.875 meters. So I'm going to type move again. I'm going to select my roller, and I'm going to type return. Now I'll come back here, and again, it doesn't really matter what I snap on because I'm just going to basically enter a displacement here, vertical displacement. And again, it's helpful if you've got your ortho command selected, so we make sure that we're going straight up. Okay, and that should be ortho. And we're going to put type 0.875. Okay, let's see how that looks. So again, a good way to check this is to kind of look at, oops, we're still in the user coordinate system. So let's bring this back here to world coordinate system, and we'll look at a right view. Zoom in on that so we can see it. And we got troubles, okay, because that, oops, well, actually, I'm going to strike that. I'm looking at this in a perspective view. So let's come back over here to the menu in the upper right corner, or upper left corner, excuse me. And we'll come down here and show us the parallel view. Okay, that looks good. You can see that this is now right above the end of this, and we'll verify that even more certainly in just a sec. But let's look at it from a top view, and that looks pretty good as well. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see. So it looks like we got that lined up very well. And you know, it's easy to get this misaligned if you're not careful with that user coordinate system you set up. So again, making sure that you're in an ortho mode is really helpful. Okay, so now we want to put these rollers across the top of the conveyor, and the best way to do that is using the array command. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit more so I can see it better. And I'm going to, well, let's just go ahead and select this. Okay, and then I'm going to type array. Oops. Y. And it's going to ask me what kind of array I want. I'm going to tell it I want a rectangular array. And right away it gives me an array that's 3 by 4. So let's get this down to 1 by 3. And then let's type spacing. Okay, and we want these maybe 1 or 0.1 meter apart, so that gives us basically a gap between them. You can put whatever spacing you want, but I'm going to just use 0.1. Makes my calculation how many rollers I need a little easier. So let's put 0.1. Okay, and the default's 0.8, so I'll put 0.1. Okay, so there. Now the next thing we want to do is tell it how many we want, and I can come up here and I can just kind of keep going like this till I get to the end of the conveyor. But if I'm putting using a spacing of 0.1 meter, and it's 12 meters long, that tells me I need 120 of these guys. So let's just go ahead and type 120 and see what that does for us. We can always change it later if we don't like it. Okay, all right, now let's see how that looks. Let's kind of come back here to, we'll type return to tell it we're done. Come to the top view. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Look at a side view. That looks pretty good too. So come back here. So that looks good. The next thing we want to do is put, some sheet metal around the sides of it. And the easiest way to do that is to just extrude this rectangle we used for the footprint up to the sides. Now we won't bring it quite all the way up to the top because we want our rollers exposed on top. So let's bring it up to say 0.875, so half the roller is exposed, and you could vary that depending upon what kind of mechanism you're using to support this. So again, we're going to come back and type extrude, E-X-T-R-U-D-E, and I'm going to again go to mode because a minute ago I set it for the solid. Now I'm going to set it for the surface. All right, so and now I'm going to select the outline here, and I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to type 0.875. Okay, and that actually looks pretty good. Let's see how that looks from the side view. All So zoom out a little bit on this. Go to the right. Zoom in on a little bit more. That looks pretty good. You can see the rollers are, half of them are kind of above the top of the conveyor and the other half are below. We'll look at this from the top and that looks good. So we'll come back here to our ISO view and that looks pretty good. And we could show our shop here again if we wanted. And that looks pretty good too. So it looks like it's roughly centered. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is start bringing in our benches that we already saved. So let's go back to the base layer here, 0. And we don't actually have to create layers for the benches because we actually had the benches in layers when we saved them. So that layer information will come with the bench. So we'll go over here to our blocks menu. And we'll get the bench here that we created, and I got several of these. I've been demonstrating this to various members of the class, so actually clean house here, but let's just go ahead and select the bench here, and we'll come across, and we'll make one bench, and then we'll copy it like we did in the previous 2D example. I'm just going to bring this in here and snap to the lower corner of the bench. And again, you might want to zoom in on this to just make sure that it looks like it's aligned with that corner. And what we're going to want to do is move this forward 1 meter, or is it 1 meter or is it 2 meters? 2 meters. But we also want to put a 10 centimeter gap between the bench and the table. Now at this point, you might want to get rid of some of the snap options that we've specified here. So I'm going to go back to settings and object snap, and I'm going to clear everything, and I'm just going to take the endpoints here, and actually I'm going to need a midpoint here, but I'll come back and turn that on in a second, because when I'm getting down here I don't want to get confused between the midpoint and the endpoint. So let's just type move, and I'm going to select the bench, return, and I'm going to move this out this way, and I want to bring it out 0.1 meters or 10 centimeters. That looks good. Now while I'm here, let's go ahead and make one for the other side. So I'm going to go copy, select the bench, and specify my base point. This time I'm going to take this corner over here, and I'm going to move it to this corner of the bench. Zoom in a little bit so I can make sure I'm on the corner. Okay, that's good enough. And I'm going to do a move. So I'll select the bench, return. My base point is going to be right here. And the second point, I'm going to zoom out here, and okay, so my ortho command is still on. That's really helpful. So I'm going to go 0.1. So I got a bench over there as well. So I got benches on both sides. So let's zoom out just a little bit so we can see these benches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move them forward. I'm going to do this, do this together, so I don't have to repeat this. This is part of the lesson in work efficiency. So let's go move this one and this one, return, and zoom out this so I can make sure I'm snapping on a corner. And again, it's not real critical here because I'm going to move it, along the y-axis, and I've got the ortho mode on, so it should be constrained. So I'm just going to go ahead and type 2 and zoom out a little bit. Now you can see the benches. So now the next thing I do is just repeat this to make additional benches, and we're going to have a spacing here of 3 meters to get them all to the end. Before I do that though, why don't I go ahead and I'll just go ahead and make the benches, then we'll bring in our workers, so we can just kind of repeat the process so you can get a little bit of discipline with this. So the next thing, let's go ahead and use the copy command again, the copy tool, select the benches, return. Okay, now I got to get a reference point here, and again, it's not critical because it's just going to be a relative, but I'm going to move it this way, and I'm going to type 3. And then the next one's going to be 6, and the next one after that's going to be 9, and then I'm going to type return because I'm done. Okay, so now I've got the benches, and if I go back and look at my layers menu, you'll see that it's actually created a new layer called bench, and you can tell that from the color as well because they're kind of wood color. If we look at the top view again here, you can see they line up pretty nicely. Good. Okay, so the next thing to do is bring in our worker, and we're only going to put the worker on one side because I don't have a 95 percentile male here. At least I don't think I do. So let's go ahead and bring in the worker. Now we want to center the worker on in front of the bench. The easiest way, quite honestly, to do that is just to simply create a line here temporarily, and I'll come over to this corner. I'll zoom in on this a little bit more to make sure we get on the corner. Take this one and then come all the way over to here. Okay, return until I'm done. Okay, and then I'm going to set my snap settings over here and go to object snap, and I want to make sure this midpoint is now selected. Okay. So now let's go back to our object or block menu, and this time I'm going to select the F5 reach, double click on that, and remember I made the toe here or this 10 centimeter offset the insertion point for this, so I will just put this here, and now I've got my worker right away centered facing that bench. And actually now I can take out this line here, I don't need that, so I'll just select it and then hit erase to get rid of it. But now I want to put my workers on here, so I'll use the copy command and select this object, make our reference point here the toe, and we'll move forward and we'll make one at 3, one at 6, and one at 9, and that should give us the workers on one side. Okay, and if I had a block for my 95 percentile male stature, I'd put that on the other side, but that's going to be part of your exercise. So that, and again, if I go back and look at the layers, you'll see that there's a layer there now automatically for the F5 and a layer there for the bench. Those are separate layers. I'm in the 0 layer, so I could turn off the 5 percentile females if I want. I can turn off the bench if I want to, and I can turn off the conveyor if I want to. So everything's there, and I can hide the shop if I want to. So the only thing left to do now is to actually complete the shop, and we'll do that in the next video. Before I leave though, why don't you let me just remind you to save the file. So you can just come up here and click on save, and this is going to be exercise 4.4, and 3D shop, and put your unique name. My unique name is TJA, and I will save this to my desktop. Oops, desktop's over here, I guess. There. Okay, and we're good to go.